I'm going to run you through what I believe to be one of the most complex weapons we have in Destiny. If you're new to fusion rifles, I'm going to break down the core concepts of what's what on these things so that you have an idea next time one of them drops. And if you're already a fusion connoisseur, I have a special chart for you today, so let me know by the end if I did okay, would you? To jump right in, let's first talk about the archetypes. High impacts shoot 5 bolts that deal a lot of damage, but they take 10 years to charge. Precisions shoot 7 bolts dealing around 40 damage each, and they charge 25% faster. That main ingredient that you die to all the time, that's the one. Adaptives also shoot 7 bolts, but they only deal 39 damage, so just a hair less but slightly quicker charge. And then we have rapids. Those shoot 9 bolts total, and they only deal 29 each, but under half a second charge time. There are key differences on these other than just the bolt count, damage, and charge time though. I find people often forget that archetypes have intrinsic perks. For example, did you know that an aggressive frame shotgun's rate of fire gets way quicker after a kill? Well, here they are for the 4 fusion rifles, and I mainly want to point out that precisions feel so good because of that vertical recoil. You know, because Guardians, they're like more of a tall cylinder, not some wide disc. Now, the other one to point out is crouching and aiming down sights on high impacts right before it fires. The burst is a complete game changer when you do that. And lastly, let's not forget that similar to shotguns, you deal with the spread RNG. Of course, if you hit every single bolt in a burst from a fusion rifle, they're deadly, but that's not so often, and a big driver for what I talk about later in the video. Barring any damage fall off, precisions and adaptives generally need 5 of their 7 bolts to hit for a kill. High impacts need 4, sometimes 3 out of their total of 5, and then rapids typically need 7 out of their 9. Now there's more to these archetypes though, and I'm going to keep comparing them to a shotgun just for some context. So let's say you had a shotgun drop with a stability masterwork. You'd probably be pissed because we all know that that's basically going to do nothing for you. Well, Bungie came out and highlighted a couple of high-level tidbits for you that you should know. For example, they explained that on high-impact fusions, your range stat is more important than stability. Then on rapids, it's actually the inverse. They benefit significantly more from stability than they do from range. This left the impression that adaptives and precisions are a bit of a mix and that they benefit equally from the 2 stat types. I will say that range always helps protect you from damage fall off and accuracy cones, but I do believe stability is outright more important on fusions for making sure you hit enough bolts. It doesn't stop here though, so hopefully what I've made so far makes sense and you're ready for the juice, because the more I dove into these, the more questions that I had. Alright, every weapon out there has the 4 columns of perks, right? The first has the scopes or the barrels, and the rules are fairly common here. You want to boost the weapon's base stats that you prefer. I always recommend zoom because it helps push out your effective range. Too much of it can reduce aim assist, like maybe your timeline's vertex is fine with 19 zoom instead of 21, but my point is that with zoom, you can go for a stability masterwork or stability stat points, and then the range bar doesn't need to be as high. Handling is always preference to your playstyle, and just keep in mind the stuff I said earlier about the archetype flavors. Now obviously columns 3 and 4 are the perk trees that most people pay attention to on all weapons, and for good reason. But before I highlight the key perks that you should be looking for in these columns at the end of the video, this is the part where I circle back to my opening statement about how fusions are some of the most complex weapons in the game. Column 2 is not just a stat bucket. In fact, there are 3 pillars that I want to break down for you in this video because fusions have profile changing perks. Think of it as 3 different spots on your fusion that can transform their charge time and damage. In column 2, you have accelerated coils and liquid coils. Of course, there's other perks there that affect the stats like stability, range, etc. But these 2 perks will actually change the fusion rifle, okay? So accelerated coils will cut the charge time by 40 milliseconds at the cost of 2% less damage. On a high impact, 940 milliseconds versus 1000 isn't that noticeable, but when you go to a rapid, 420 versus 460 is proportionally really solid. Now, when you hear only 2% damage reduction, that feels like, okay, that's super tiny, like who cares, that's going to be fine. But what if some archetypes are right on that fine line where maybe 5 bolts will kill at base, but then a hair less damage, you'll need an extra bolt to kill your opponent? Like here's an adaptive versus a 6 resilience guardian hitting 5 bolts with and without accelerated coils. Now, liquid coils is the opposite. It will actually give you 2% more damage, but at the cost of a 40 millisecond slower charge time. It doesn't end here either. The second spot you have is that 5th masterwork on fusions called charge time. Each little upgrade you do while you're masterworking your weapon on charge time cuts a tiny bit of the time off the charge, but also cuts a tiny bit of damage. The individual increments, like from one step to the next, might be negligible, but a fully masterwork, like say from the level 1 to the level 10, is similar to accelerated coils. It cuts 40 milliseconds and roughly 2% damage. What's important to notice now is that those two different spots can stack. So you could put accelerated coils plus a charged masterwork, and now all of a sudden you're cutting 80 milliseconds for 4% damage reduction. What about the third spot now? Well, that's the fact that you can roll backup plan in the 4th column. That sucker cuts your charge time by 30%, but reduces the damage by 20%. Sounds like a really cool trade-off, like you're giving up 20%, but you're gaining 30%, right? But you'll see in a minute here why you should be really careful with this perk. Lastly, I guess I said 3 spots, but technically there's 4, and that's the fact that we can roll a couple of adept fusion rifles. I want to be very clear here. I need to shout this at the top of a mountain because I still hear the wrong information around this. The adept charge time masterwork gives you that cut in time, but does not decrease your damage. It's literally free real estate. I don't know about you guys, but when I first started using fusion rifles, I felt lost in the sauce with all those altering perk choices. So hopefully you can screenshot that and keep reference. But if you've watched my content before, you know I'm not done here. I started to question, well, okay, what if I did stack accelerated coils with a charge masterwork? Does that matter on one archetype but not on the other? What if I have backup plan giving that massive 20% damage reduction for the 30% charge decrease, but then I pair it with liquid coils? Like maybe that 2% damage back is a bit of a game changer. So yes, I was crazy enough to go down that rabbit hole and map out the 11 combinations. With 4 archetypes in the game, that is 44 times to cry. Add the 11 resilience levels that we have, and that's over 400 apologies to my community members in the Discord in a private match. I made you some tables, but before I fill them out, I have several disclaimers along the way. The first is that no, I didn't actually have 44 specifically isolated combination fusion rolls to use. Thanks to everyone in my Discord and the amazing crew in Mercules' Discord, whether it be Sam, GS, Phaeton, Lily, you name it, the list goes on. I don't mean to offend anyone by not catching everyone. It was nearly possible to cover all of our bases. Hundreds of tests were done, but for any short gaps, I needed to just use some math and predict the result. You might be scratching your head like, Castle, you haven't even told us what you're going to show us in this table, and I will in just a second, but I need to just say thanks to the developers for opening up to the community. They've sat in on several podcasts or live streams talking about really specific things within the game, and that enables us to help everyone else out by making things like this. Now this year, one of my focuses is to continue bringing the nitty-gritty to the table, but improve on presenting this stuff in a more practical manner. So here's the table, and it's as basic as I could possibly make it, and let me give you some context. If I wrote yes, it was simply to state that the combination of these profile changing perks, whatever ones they are in the table, are a good idea. If I wrote no, then obviously I feel it was a bad idea and there was reason behind it. So let me just give you an example. Let's say you had a precision archetype. At base, if you hit the 5 out of 7 bolts in a single burst, you'll do around 200 damage, killing all resilience levels, right? If you used backup plan, sure, it'll be great to bring your charge time down from that 740 all the way to half a second, but then your damage drops all the way down from 200 to 160, meaning you won't even kill a 0 resilience guardian. In fact, you're going to need a 6th bolt just to kill your opponent, and that's going to be a lot more rare. But then what if you stacked accelerated coils with a charge time masterwork? You can get that time down from 740 to 660 while still killing most of the resilience levels. Like I think you can kill 5 or 6 and below. You will notice that a couple of them don't say yes or no. And that's because I caught myself getting way too hyper focused on all of these profile changing perks. We obviously can't forget that simply adding stability or range can be crucial for your fusion to hit its bolts in the first place. I tried to recommend other perks like PR means particle repeater for that stability, or projection fuse to get range in cases where I believed it would be a bad idea to go for a profile altering perk. At the end of the day, you can just stick with your base and go for consistency and adjust your playstyle. Like that's totally fine. But I just really wanted to break down all of these combinations because I had no idea going in which ones would be horribly bad for my fusion and which ones can actually be pretty spicy. Look at how fast rapids can be when you stack some of this stuff. You can have a 1/4 of a second charge time. I'm sure it's limited by the tick rate of the game, but either way, for the hardcores who want to see the numbers for all of this, I've linked the sheet in the description. And then I just about put my pencil down, and at this point someone said, well dude, what about high impact reserves? That's right, you guys always have these case scenarios that change everything, don't you? For those that don't know, High Impact Reserves is a perk in the 4th column that once you reach the bottom half of a total mag size, like let's say your mag holds 8 and you have 4 left, you will start to get a bonus damage in those remaining shots. Like that 4th one will get a certain amount, and then when you have 3 left, you'll get a little bit more, and then 2 left, a little bit more than that. And it seems negligible because it's anywhere from, in theory, between 2 to 9%, but my guess is it's actually between 3 and 6%. And you know what? It actually does make a big difference. There's a lot of scenarios where that puts you over the threshold and makes it super good on a fusion. So of course, I made a table for that too. Now, obviously you can't stack that with backup plans, so those are blanked out, but here it is. And then I decided to toss in a kickstart table. Admittedly, Kickstart does not proc anywhere near what I feel it should, but when it does, wow, 100 milliseconds faster charge time with a 20% damage boost. It's insane. We're going to move on, so hopefully you can just screenshot some of those tables, or that provides some context if you ever decide to get into fusion rifles. But to cap off the video, I really want to highlight some go-to perks in general that are just beastly on fusion rifles. I won't read their descriptions or go through every stat though. I recommend you check out my friend Dre's website. It's called D2 Gunsmith. When you hover over the perk with your mouse, it'll explain all of the info. Now, I'd say that there are 3 at the tippity top of the wish list. Under Pressure being number 1, honestly. It is amazing for helping you hit your bolts. Like, this thing will make a fusion go from feeling totally mediocre to absolute god tier. And it's in the 3rd column to boot, so it doesn't interfere with everything we've mentioned today. Next up would be Tap the Trigger. This is also S tier for the same reasons. Those 2 combined might be the number 1 roll out there, hence the Xur gradient memery going on. And probably number 3, I'd give Firmly Planted if you can remember to crouch. Like, this perk does so much, it'll even walk your kids to school. You just have to remember to actually proc it. Then of course there's the 3 I've mentioned already: Backup Plan, High Impact Reserves, and then Kickstarter, which are special with the tables I provided. And then I'd say the next ones, maybe we'll call them the honorable mentions that are worth noting, are Rangefinder. This is always good for pushing your effective range, which allows you to push into your stability stat on the actual weapon. Slideways is actually super slept on for stability on sliding and bursting with your fusion. Threat Detector or Surplus, people always talk about those on shotguns, but yeah, handling is like really important in general, so I like them on a fusion as well. Hipfire Grip is also slept on. And then Harmony, that's a fun new perk that I'm still finding a lot of fun with, especially when you can get it on both your primary and your secondary. There's many more out there, of course, but these would be the ones that I hunt for that feel like they are game changers for how a fusion feels. Now, if you want other people to find this video, then liking, commenting, those can help a ton. But if you hit that sub button, then I'll see you in my next video. Oh, and remember, Quick Charge also works for fusions. Cheers.